Other than that, you want to talk a little. कुकर कहाँ बज रहा है?
घर पे खाना बन रहा है.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Just a disclaimer before we begin. None of the advice or conversation that we have is supposed to be taken as financial advice. For formalized financial advice that we give out, please refer to our portfolios that are listed on Small Case and Wealth Desk. And let's get into this week's topic. So, clearly, if you've been outside your house lately, it's been extremely hot, where even in February, I think it registered one of the hottest summers that India's faced lately. And that seems to be going nowhere, and it's probably going to get worse. So that comes with a lot of opportunities in terms of investments. So whether that's your ice cream brands or your beverage brands, as we covered in the last week's episode, or AC sales going up, or any of that, just cooling down the heat that we've been feeling. And one of the key players that we need for cooling down is electricity. And that's where we start our conversation today. So, what's up with electricity in India, guys?
There isn't enough electricity supply. That is what is up. So, for some time now in India after COVID, the demand is not being met. This whole cycle started, I think, last year when there was a heat wave and countrywide there were shortages for electricity. So after that big fiasco happened, the government this year is dead set on not letting that happen again. And as you said already, the temperatures are rising and the peak demand is supposed to go up a lot this summer. I think 230 plus gigawatts, so which is a lot. And yeah, so in preparation for that, a lot of steps are being taken, which we'll discuss further.
So 230 compares with about 215. So the peak happens every April.
Right.
That's when summer peaks out and consumption of power as well peaks out. The additional factor I think which we missed out was also that other than the heat wave and household consumption of electricity, post COVID there has also been a massive pickup in infrastructure activity and manufacturing activity. Now that manufacturing activity also requires a lot of electricity, which adds to the overall demand. And that itself is reflected in a very strong PMI for India, which has been consistently up for the last 19 months now. So there is household demand, yes, which peaks out during the summer, but also there is that structural manufacturing demand which adds to the overall pressure on electricity generation. So last April, there was a requirement of 216 gigawatt. Now this April, it is estimated that that will go up to 230 gigawatt. And last year itself, India wasn't able to meet the 216 gigawatt demand. We were short by about 4% last time. And just to give a context of 4%, it sounds like a number that is fairly low, but 4% was last it happened was in FY15. Right. So from 2010 all the way till 2019, the deficit has been continuously reducing. The deficit in 2010 used to be as high as 12%. So from there it had come down to 0 point something percent, less than 1%, 0.4% in fact,
Yeah.
by 2019. And COVID obviously was a year where the demand itself dropped down because of the lockdown. So that wasn't a problem. But as soon as activity picked up, 21 and 22 both have been areas of massive shortage. There are some additional pressures also, right? It's not just about India not having the capacity. The power capacity is definitely higher than 230 gigawatts. So it can manage it if it is utilized fully, but there are issues in terms of why it is not utilized. And that leads to just one answer, and that is the primary answer being raw material. Right? So you want to talk a little about the raw material situation. So it wasn't just the demand that picked up in the last 2 years, but the raw material shortage also added to it. So the second side of the coin you probably want to highlight a little bit.
So basically, in India, the electricity sector mainly is they produce electricity from coal and natural gas, which is the thermal sector, accounts for I think 90% of the electricity produced in India, and then we have renewable sources like hydro and wind energy. But coal and natural gas are the main thing. Now the problem with these supply of these raw materials is, so coal, we don't have a lot of reliable supply. Mainly we produce electricity on that, but a lot of coal is imported from outside. And the problem with natural gas is the prices are crazy volatile. So all around, if you just look up natural gas prices, it's all over the place. And
Which is also
especially,
imported in a large quantity, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah,
Right.
it's I think totally imported. Our domestic production of natural gas is very bad, basically. So India, we don't usually have natural gas supply, and that leads to, we have, I think, out of the 411 gigawatts total capacity that India has, around 25 gigawatts comes from natural gas based production plants. And almost all of those plants are either non performing or they are not performing at their best because lack of supply. So, yeah.
So lack of supply, and I think the second point also is that over the last 2 years, because of the whole Russia-Ukraine crisis and other supply chain issues globally, the price of both imported coal as well as natural gas shot up.
Yeah.
And so there is a pressure of raw material prices shooting up. And number two, the manufacturing or generation of electricity using imported coal and natural gas also becomes more expensive. Now, because it's more expensive, it doesn't necessarily imply that the generating company also gets a higher tariff on it. Most of these contracts are predated and they're long-term purchase agreements where the tariff is already decided. So if the variable cost, which is the cost of the raw material, has shot up dramatically, but your selling price is fixed at some prehistoric level, then you're making a loss. So it doesn't really make sense for the power company to generate that power in the first place. And that's why a lot of the capacities, whether it is imported coal or whether it is natural gas, both have been lying pretty dormant over the last few years. Which adds to the pressure of being not able to supply the power needed, and hence the ultimate solution is a power cut. So last year there were multiple of these power cuts which happened at the peak of summer, when households at least require power the most. Um, but this time things are different. Um, and the government is all set to say that there will be no power cuts. But saying and doing are two different things, right? And this time there are a lot of steps that they've taken since the beginning of the year. Since Jan itself, there have been multiple steps taken, which at least gives you a confidence that there is foresight this time. There is coordination between various departments. There are resolute steps, not only in terms of ensuring power availability, but also solving for all those underlying issues which hamper the availability of power in the first place. So a very well-rounded approach. And the one stock, finally we are coming to the stock, which benefits out of this entire situation is NTPC.
So, National Thermal Power Corporation is NTPC.
Nobody knew. So yeah, NTPC being the largest power plant in India, power manufacturer in India. Do they call it manufacturer? Power
Producer,
generator in India.
generator,
Power producer. Okay. Power generating company in India. This will stand to benefit the most out of from all the steps that are being currently taken.
yeah. Right.
Um, are you all ready for a quiz?
Oh my God.
Okay. Which is the largest power plant, or where is the largest power plant in the world? Power plant, huh?
In the
One power
world, huh?
plant.
Electricity.
Russia.
You all don't want to win or what? Answer no.
It's not like we know the answer.
China.
Yes. Yes, Yash takes it away.
Nice.
China. Yeah, it's called the Three Gorges Dam, and
It's
it's
a
got a
hydro plant.
capacity of 22. Yeah, it's got a capacity of 22,500 megawatt.
This is
Um,
hydrogen power, right? Sorry, hydropower. Like,
yeah, hydropower. So
yeah.
it's on the Yangtze River, and 22 and a half gigawatt essentially is the
Wow.
capacity. Uh, Compared to a total NTPC, who's got 70
Gigawatt
gigawatts
of, yeah.
across across
All of
88
this.
plants.
Oh God.
I think putting
Also,
that into
NTPC's largest plant is, yeah,
no, no. I was just saying that that 70 is also a lot. It's almost fourth of the Indian power generated.
yeah.
Uh,
Yash saving India's face once again.
Uh, you're saying something about
Yeah.
NTPC's largest plant.
So yeah, so their largest plant is about 4,760 megawatts. So that's about a fourth
Four.
of the largest power plant in China, in the world. Sorry, not in
Wow.
China.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, government action. Let's do this for the government action for all the. So now we know the problems. Problem was number one, raw material. Um Raw material only. Okay. So government action. Let's do this one by one. Starting Hardik. One point in terms of what the government is doing in order to ease the situation out and ensure that there are no power cuts.
All right. So the biggest thing right now is all the production plants in India. Either they don't operate at full capacity or they are completely shut down. So, in emergency cases, the government has the power to force the plants basically to operate at their maximum capacity. This comes under Section 11 of the Electricity Act. There is an emergency clause, and the government has been using that clause to force coal and natural gas based plants to force start their production so the demand is being met.
Yeah, so I think this was invoked in 2022 as well.
Yeah,
This is not the first time that this has been invoked. In 2022, I think it was done in a much more haphazard manner compared to
yeah.
now, because they realized that there is a shortage and they asked, there is a directive rather than using the word forced, it's a directive that they issue, and they direct everybody to import, is what they did last year. Import kar do coal, import kar do natural gas is
I
what
think
the
six
last year's
percent of
narrative was.
all coal plants that they use, they had to import that coal. So domestic supply isn't like short.
Yeah. So even this time, I think, but this time it's a much more coordinated effort. And it's not just unidirectional in terms of saying, agar supply nahi hai, to import it. While that is one of the steps, there are multiple steps that have been taken,
Right.
starting with coal-based plants.
Right. So, apart since coal has such a major role to play in power generation, a lot of these plants, the government has urged them to undertake any maintenance that's required beforehand, so that none of those maintenance will be scheduled during the crunch period of generating as much power as the demand requires. So, the power ministry has been coordinating with the Ministry of Coal to ensure that that supply is constant, and with the Ministry of Railway so that the transportation of the supply happens in an unhampered manner. So that's a pretty good move as well.
Yeah. Last time also, I think there was a good coordination between the railway industry as well as coal supplies.
Right.
When there was a coal shortage again, you were seeing a lot of these passenger
Being filled with,
trains getting
yeah,
delayed.
right.
No. Trains getting delayed because cargo trains had to be passed
Correct.
Yeah.
on an urgent basis. So the
Right.
volume as well as the priority for cargo trains carrying coal
Increase.
was much higher.
Yeah.
So I think this time as well there is a commitment from the Ministry of Railway in terms of assigning certain number of rakes to transporting coal, which is a positive sign. But other than focusing only on the coal-based plants, which form about 80% of India's generation, there are steps also taken on imported coal-based plants as well as natural gas-based plants, which are almost shut down. Right, coal-based is at least running because of domestic supply, but the others are because of feasibility issues on the verge of or shut down. So, what
That's
on the
what went
coal-based, imported
wrong.
coal-based plants? Yeah.
So I
So that's
think
what
with
went wrong last
imported,
time.
yeah, so with imported, there are two problems. One is the international coal prices are very high, and second is there are already power agreements signed with the customers, so you can't pass on the additional cost of the raw materials to the customer. It becomes difficult for the companies to sell this electricity. So government has authorized and asked to for all imported coal-based plants to run at full capacity, and they are also working on rates to compensate power companies for all this higher priced coal, imported coal that will be used.
True that, yeah.
Cool. And plus, I think to ease out um domestic supplies, they've also directed companies to use blend their coal with imported coal. And the pass through is allowed on that as well. So that also eases the situation out. Other than that, there are natural gas based plants as well. And even NTPC, the government directed to start its uh, plant about 4,000 megawatts of capacity and run it at full capacity. But obviously, just saying that run it at full capacity doesn't help. The whole problem of natural gas has to be solved first. So the government went a step ahead and directed GAIL to supply the natural gas to NTPC. Um, so that's a good way of saying that okay, we're passing a directive to for you to make that electricity, but we're also solving your issues which kept you from doing it in the first place. The other thing which has been significant is also the fact that apart from the PPAs that the generation companies signed to sell coal, anything beyond that they're also allowed to sell on the exchanges like IEX. Sorry. So for IEX, for example, again there was a price ceiling of 12 rupees earlier, which again becomes unfeasible for someone like someone who's running a natural gas based plant or a imported coal based plant to sell at 12 bucks. So that pricing mechanism has been changed and approved, and a new pricing mechanism has been introduced where the ceiling goes up to 50 rupees, and there is no floor. So that becomes much more feasible for power plants to utilize, and improves the overall economics of the entire sector. So a lot of action from the government on all the fronts, whether it is using regulation to dictate terms, to ensuring that there is supply of raw material, to ensuring that even the pain points in terms of price are taken care of. So very wholesome approach, which obviously we think NTPC will be the largest beneficiary of, given the fact that it is the largest player and it is a PSU. But there are some other reasons as well because of which NTPC stands out in the entire power crowd, and that becomes an extra lucrative opportunity from the current situation.
Yeah, I think the thesis that demand is going up and only comes into play in case of NTPC because it is the largest player, so it comes to benefit largest from this scenario. So I think, as you had mentioned, it's almost one-fourth of the electricity generated in India is done through NTPC, and most of their plants use coal. So the benefit here is that government stepping in to like to help with the coal supply helps NTPC the most. Then there's an advantage that NTPC has. They have their own captive mines. So what happens in in this case is that even if the amount that is generated from these captive mines is less, marginally it is much more beneficial whenever there is shortage of coal or there is increased demand. So I think in this year FY23, NTPC has produced almost 15 million tons of coal, which is increased 53% year over year. And if you look at the utilization, almost 10% of NTPC's capacity is gas based. So, government action through GAIL on supply of gas as well, and the pricing changes will also increase to higher utilization. I think we are talked about the PLF factor. So, for NTPC, almost 75% of PLF is there compared to throughout the country it's 63% for the all India average. So what PLF is measures how much of the percentage of capacity is used by energy companies. It's similar to a capacity utilization ratio for manufacturing companies. And one operating advantage that is unique to NTPC because of its government status is its lower cost of debt. So, because it is government backed giant, the cost of the chance of default are much lower. So its bonds are rated much higher. So whenever they go to raise money for capex or expansion, it's easier for them to raise debt because most of the expansion happens here through debt. I think their cost of debt for in the latest quarter was around 6.32%, which is up from last year naturally due to the increase in interest rates. But it is still good because I think till FY26 they are planning to spend around 25,000 crore more. So they'll have to pick on more debt.
They're planning to spend
Currently,
25,000 CR every year. So,
yeah, 25,000 CR per annum, sorry, till FY26. And, this is a good amount of, let's say, which is the current debt they are servicing around 1.9 lakh crore. So they will keep expanding and increase their capacity further for the India growth story to meet its energy demands. I think we should understand what the numbers look like for this. If you can give us a brief, Sagar.
Yeah. So, yeah. So overall, I think what happens is there is double-digit growth in electricity demand, and that will result in double-digit growth for NTPC as well, at least for this quarter. So, from a near-term perspective, um, that translates well for NTPC. Unlike a last year where demand was great, but because supply wasn't there, you're not able to sell much, and because you're not able to sell much, you're not really seeing that translation from demand from an end consumer all the way to financial performance for someone like an NTPC. But that definitely is likely to change here, and so that's one trigger for the stock. The second one is financial performance overall over the next few years looks nice. It's not just about the next quarter or two. And that is because if the government is intent on solving issues for the entire sector in terms of raw material availability and in terms of obviously keeping the end consumer in mind, but that ends up benefiting a lot of these generation companies. So they will end up seeing better utilization. They'll end up seeing better availability of raw material, higher efficiencies, more operating leverage, and when the pricing also improves, they're not really operating plants at a loss. So all of that results in better margin performance as well. So while India's electricity demand will continue growing at a colossal rate, and NTPC will benefit from that at a revenue standpoint over the next few years, it will also see great margin expansion and profit growth, which is facilitated by government action as well as efficiency improvement. So over the next 2 years, at least, what it looks like is that it will clock a 12% earnings CAGR easy. And this is higher compared to the 9% that it has clocked in the last 5 years before this. So there is a step up in terms of earnings growth, which is expected because of all this action. And that itself should be enough for the stock to find a trigger in terms of outperformance. Historically, the stock has done nothing. Over the last 10 years, it has been absolutely dud between a tight range. While India's overall electricity generation has improved, capacity has improved, consumption has improved, all of that has been standing true. But for NTPC, none of that has translated. But finally, you're in a place where things are working out. So we do see potential for earnings growth as well as valuation re-rating to happen from here. And if we do a simple SOTP on the stock, it comes to a price of about 220 per share, which turns out to be pretty cheap, even in the context of what the implied valuation is on an FY24 basis. So the price to book turns out to be a 1.2 times. and price to earnings of 9 times, which is very reasonable compared to the 10% earnings growth that the stock has to offer. And on top of that, there is a 5% dividend yield, which is rarely found in current markets, right? Yeah, NTPC looks good not only from a near-term perspective but also from a long-term perspective. And just because it has given a good return of 35% over the last year doesn't mean that it's a stop here. There is room for another 20-25% return easy if things keep working out in its favor like they currently are. So there's still money on the table for NTPC to be picked up on. So other than that, there's also this massive factor of movement from fossil to non-fossil, where currently 90% of NTPC's generation comes from coal and natural gas, which are thermal based and fossil fuel based. But they're taking an effort to move that towards a non-renewable source as well. And that also provides, not from a near term, actually from a near term as well, that provides some valuation uptick both from a near and long term perspective. You want to highlight those two factors?
All right. So talking about the renewable energy part of NTPC, so there is this company inside, subsidiary inside of NTPC, which is NTPC Green Energy, basically, and it spearheads all of NTPC's renewable efforts in the renewable energy sector area. So the company NTPC has been trying to sell a 20% stake in NEGL, which is Green Energy Limited, for a long time now. And yesterday only, a Malaysian fund Petronas offered 3,800 CRs for the 20% stake, which is like a lot higher from the 3,000 CR expectation of like which NTPC had, and it's I think 78% higher than the second highest bidder. So now the stock is in full focus. Everybody's looking at it, and now would be a very right time to invest in it.
Yeah, so that provides a short-term trigger because that values the arm at about $2 billion, and that's a good 10-11% of current market cap. Uh, but also, the good part about this part is that because it's green energy, it's renewable, it's the future, and it's emerging, and all that jazz will take valuations higher than it becomes sexier than your
Yeah.
thermal business. So that deems better valuation. And NTPC's plan over the next 10 years is to, number one, double its capacity entirely from the 70 gigawatt to about 130, not exactly double. But within that, they also intend to take the composition of renewables from about 10% right now to 45% in the future, in 10 years. So the overall structure or composition of NTPC itself will turn out to be a lot greener, a lot more valuation accretive than the current business. So you've got short-term triggers as well as long-term story both in place from the fossil business as well as non-fossil business both for NTPC, which puts it in a very unique spot compared to where it was over the last 10 years.
It's not boring anymore. So
We'll talk after 1 year. If the stock has done anything, it's not boring.
I think next 2 quarters are crucial and earnings for our near-term triggers.
Yep.
I think talk about all the buzz that NTPC is generating. One more stock that had a lot of buzz, but had just continued to go down and down is FSN e-commerce, also known as Nika. Company sells makeup through online sources and also has expanded to offline. But I
Right.
think after this vast decline, uh, is there more downside left to be capitalized on, or is this stock going to go up? That's an interesting topic to study for next week.
Yes.
If not,
all right, guys,
Is it? It is. It is.
we'll make it
It is. It
interesting.
is.
Don't you worry. Yeah.
Because a lot of these tech stocks have been talked about as Zomato, Paytm, Nykaa. So it's only natural we cover them next.
Right.
All right. So next week we are doing Nika. So see you then. Got it.
No, no.
Done.
It's only Yash who
You're
can
done.
end the podcast.
Acha, ha, end it,
That's
bhai. Like that's what I was saying.
trademark.
And that's a wrap, guys.